Welcome to Into the Tao podcast from the wood between the worlds. Maybe you know the story. A young man named Diggory goes to visit his uncle in his office in London in the 19th century. His uncle happens to be a kind of a warlock or magician. Uncle Andrew gives him a couple of rings. He touches one of the rings and instantly vanishes out of this world and finds himself in a park-like setting with trees all around and with ponds here and there. And he discovers by accident that if you put on one of the other rings and jump into another pond, not the pond that he came out of, I neglected to mention that, you find yourself in another world. Ultimately, he and some of his friends and people he wants to get rid of in this world find their way to a country that is just being created called Narnia. Well, what is the wood between the worlds but a library? After all, you walk around your shelves and you grab a book, say Charles Dickens, Our Mutual Friend. You open the book and you find yourself in another world. I instantly vanish from North America and I'm in England in the 19th century. Or perhaps I grab this book, The Three-Body Problem, a science fiction book by the Chinese author Liu Cixin. And now I'm not in North America, I'm in Asia, and I'm encountering aliens 200 years from now. Or perhaps you might even grab this book, which is the book I'm going to be introducing today, The Case for Aslan, Evidence for Jesus in the Land of Narnia. Introduction. I stepped off the bus from Heathrow onto High Street and caught my first glimpse of Oxford's famous dreaming spires. The limestone towers of this city, along with pillars in Athens, the olives of Mount Zion, and cedars beneath Mount Tai in the state of Lu, have, one could say, dreamed much of the world into being. A few paces up High Street hung a plaque to Robert Boyle, who was one of the founders of modern chemistry, and Robert Hooke, who looked at cork under a microscope and discovered what he called the cell. Behind that wall rose the turrets of University College, one of Oxford's oldest schools. In its cells studied, among others, Bill Clinton, Stephen Hawking, and the poet Percy Shelley. As a student, Shelley wrote a tract called The Necessity of Atheism, sending a copy to all the bishops and the school heads and getting kicked out of the university for his troubles. Across the street rose one of the city's oldest and loveliest spires, St. Mary's Cathedral, where a former University College student and skeptic named Jack Lewis, who now saw atheism as unnecessary, affirmed hope in the midst of World War II. We discern the freshness and purity of morning, but they do not make us fresh and pure. We cannot mingle with the splendors we see, but all the leaves of the New Testament are rustling with the rumor that it will not always be so. Someday, God willing, we shall get in. Do stones dream, further up and further in? Might their souls come alive at night? Another Oxford graduate, the fantasy writer Philip Pullman, once suggested that the gargoyles of New and Magdalen colleges descend from their perches after dark to do battle. Well, Oxford's humans certainly have mixed it up. At Belial, John Wycliffe translated the Bible into English. During a quarrel between Catholics and Protestants over how to read that book, 3 martyrs, or heretics if you will, were tried at St. Mary's, then lit a fire as shall never be put out on Broad Street. Bishop Wilberforce and Thomas Huxley debated evolution among old bones in the University Museum. After inventing chemistry, Boyle willed a series of lectures defending the Christian faith against the likes of Shelley, Pullman, and Huxley. 3 future reformers studied at Christ Church College: John Wesley, John Locke, and William Penn. Their Christian visions merged in Philadelphia, in a colony named for Penn's father, to help form the United States of America. After leaving Oxford, Shelley wrote an anti-God poem, Prometheus Unbound, that inspired Karl Marx with a dream of revolution that would form the Warsaw Pact, which would point nuclear-laden ICBMs at democratic towns. Boyle's law and Hooke's cell were not the only cutting-edge scientific concepts to emerge from this community. Here, Roger Bacon fractured light and described its nature. Here, the Merton calculators in the Middle Ages explained how geometry could describe motion. At Wadham College, John Wilkins gathered some friends, including Boyle and Hooke, who became the Royal Society, the world's oldest and most influential scientific club. These stones briefly hosted Erwin Schrödinger, and with his quantum equations and cat of Cheshire-like indeterminacy. There's the gargoyles and the cat. Charles Dodson, who made the vanishing smile of the Cheshire Cat famous, taught math at Christ Church College. Here, Edward Tyler explained how religion began, until his student Andrew Lang discovered primitive monotheism and debunked his teacher's animistic theory. Here, too, James Legge introduced the Chinese classics to the Western world. Yet Oxford's literary daydreams inspire us even more deeply. A girl chases a white cat. A hobbit puts a golden ring in his pocket. Another girl sets out to find dust and save all worlds from an evil, heretic hunting magisterium. Scenes for stories about a school for witches were also filmed or imagined here. Children meet a talking lion. Perhaps we need such escapes, in part because our universities, where diverse curiosities once met in a vision of God, have lost their universality. Society has fractured into tribes again. Mind has been divorced from heart. Our dreaming spires seem to have lost their deepest inspiration. As historian of Chinese philosophy Feng Yulan put it, that which can be believed cannot be loved, and that which can be loved cannot be believed. That's how Jack Lewis felt when he returned to Oxford from the front lines in France, with their horribly smashed men still moving like half-crushed beetles, the sitting or standing corpses, the landscape of sheer earth without a blade of grass. He was deeply moved by the mythologies of the Greeks, Irish, and Norse, as if hearing a call from another world. But he doubted any voice could give that call. Nearly all that I loved I believed to be imaginary. Nearly all that I believed to be real I thought grim and meaningless. Lewis took first-class degrees in English, Greek, and Latin literature, and philosophy and ancient history, and began to teach philosophy for Christian. A few years later, however, he wrote a book subtitled An Allegorical Apology for Christianity, Reason, and Romanticism. Jack Lewis had found what looked like a solution. He had met someone he could both believe and love. He defended his new Christian faith not only in churches, but to large audiences on the BBC and in popular books. Time magazine featured him on its front cover. National Review rated his Mere Christianity and Abolition of Man as the best and 8th best nonfiction books of the 20th century. One can find copies of Lewis's nonfiction under the night lamps of Francis Collins, who led the Human Genome Project, and of Pope John Paul II. Into the 21st century, in his God delusion, Richard Dawkins, the most famous atheist in the world and a New College gargoyle, came down to attack the old Magdalene College grotesque and his ludicrously inadequate arguments for the Christian faith, as Dawkins put it. But the ideas in Lewis's serious books proved magical in their own way. Like the wings of a butterfly, that stir up a typhoon on the other side of the world. Charles Colson was known as Richard Nixon's hatchet man. He had served as a Marine and become a hard-driving lawyer, ruthlessly cutting corners to get things done for his boss, the President of the United States. But as often happens to trolls, apes, and shepherd boys who lie in fairy tales, Colson was trapped by his own dirty tricks. He fell from power and was headed to prison. A friend lent him a copy of Mere Christianity. Colson found Lewis's arguments convincing and was born again, as his best-selling autobiography was titled. A Filipino senator named Benigno Aquino was imprisoned by the dictator Ferdinand Marcos. He read Colson's book and experienced a spiritual awakening. Aquino was allowed to fly to America for bypass surgery. 7 years later, he returned, hoping to talk Marcos into allowing the Filipinos more freedom. The Filipino is worth dying for, he boldly declared. Aquino was gunned down at the airport. Led by a Catholic bishop, a respected general, and Aquino's widow, 2 million Filipinos gathered and asked Marcos to go away. When he did, copycat people power movements broke out in Burma, Eastern Europe, and China. The Berlin Wall fell and was sold in chunks as stocking stuffers at Christmas 1989. One could thus argue that Lewis's ludicrously inadequate arguments did at least help melt Soviet ice and bring Father Christmas back to the Red Square. So, why did a man known for erudite works of literary scholarship, satirical science fiction, and such popular defenses of the faith, who had no children, suddenly start writing about talking lions and dancing fawns? And why have those stories sold some 100 million copies? Did Lewis lose confidence in the intellectual power of the gospel? Or the skeptics winning the battle of gremlins? Had his efforts to shore up the ancient spires of the Christian faith, eaten away by the acid of doubt, come to naught? Was the great Christian scholar seeking a safe space from dangerous skeptical ideas by returning to childhood fancies? On February 2nd, 1948, at a small college on the banks of the Cherwell, where Lewis Carroll once took a girl named Alice punting, C.S. Lewis defended his favorite argument for God in debate with the Catholic philosopher Elizabeth Anscombe. Lewis's most famous biographer, A.N. Wilson, says he was trounced and stung back into childhood by his defeat. Lewis gave up defending the Christian faith rationally, Wilson argues, and retreated to childhood fancies. And that, said Wilson, is how Aslan was born. An ill-omened birth, others complain. Fantasy writer Alan Garner, who studied literature at Magdalen while Lewis was still there, described the Narnia books as nasty, manipulative, morbid, misanthropic, hectoring, totalitarian, and atrociously written. Philip Pullman called them ugly and poisonous. He accused Lewis of sexism, racism, and a sadomasochistic flair for violence. He complained that Lewis damned his heroine, Susan, to hell for wanting to grow up. J.K. Rowling also complained about Lewis's treatment of Susan. Even J.R.R. Tolkien, who credited his friend for encouraging him to write The Lord of the Rings, expressed artistic doubts about Narnia. I will argue that Narnia is neither escapist nor morally repulsive, but is a brilliant artistic and intellectual success. Aslan speaks truth to our minds as well as our hearts. The Chronicles of Narnia show why, by another name, he can be both believed and loved. Jack Lewis's childish dreams reconciles human experience, making the University of Ideas universal again. Quantum theory and medieval philosophy, the Big Bang and in the beginning, justice and disgust over cancel culture, faith and reason, familiar old stories and new insights into human nature. The best moment in the first Narnia film comes when Lucy walks through the wardrobe door and watches with shining eyes as snow falls in a quiet forest lit by a lone lamp. One of the privileges of being dad or mom is the chance to watch that same light appear in the faces of our children as they crawl towards a spot in the limousine, as they crawl toward a spot of sunshine on the linoleum, laugh at a bushy-tailed squirrel running up a fir tree, or stand along a cold lake shore in southeast Alaska, the dreaming spires of mountain peaks rising all around, grab a chunk of hard glacial ice and naively ask, as my son did, "Is this the North Pole?" Narnia calls us to wonder. Diggory Kirke was the sort of person who wants to know everything. Caspian the seafarer sailed to the end of the world. At the threshold of the land of Bism, Prince William spoke as the anti-Hamlet, pulled by dueling desires rather than despairs. It may be that no mortal man has ever looked into Bism before or will ever have the chance again. And I know not how, as the years pass, I shall bear to remember that it was once in my power to have probed the uttermost pit of earth, and that I forebore. Explorers in our world have also been busy since Reepicheep pointed the bow of his kayak into the greenish-gray, trembling, shimmering wall of water at the end of the world. The screen in your pocket holds pixelated images of a galaxy of... The screen in your pocket holds pixelated images of a galaxy of imagined realities, and vastly more information than all the books in the Bodleian Library. We probe elementary particles in galaxies so distant they still glow with the light of creation. We study left-handed amino acids, continents that once covered the Earth, inhabitable zones around exoplanets. We dust off Clovis spear tips at campsites in New Mexico, or monoliths on Potbelly Hill in Turkey, where early man built some of his first temples. Solutions to the problem of the historical Jesus grace the cover of leading magazines. China and India re-emerge as giants. A tall mosque now rises a short walk from Magdalen College, while the Institute for Hindu Studies meets a few doors down from the Eagle and Child pub. What does Silicon Valley have to do with Cair Paravel? Aslan with Osama. Marsh Wiggles with mutations in the protein spikes of Wuhan coronaviruses. C.S. Lewis did not retreat into Narnia. His oracle still leads to Aslan's country, where one finds truths alive and growing like rubies in the land of Bism, capable of changing our world. Father Christmas gave gifts to the children who visited Narnia: sword, shield, medicine made from flowers in the sun, bow and arrow, a horn that would bring aid when it was blown. Narnia still offers many gifts. Among them is a juice made from the flowers of the sun, S-O-N, which heals the fatal divide between myth and reality, faith and reason, science and literature, and lets gargoyles dream happy dreams that may come true. Puddleglum, who has cured gnomes of gloomy bewitchments before, will be our first guide to philosophy, as we first seek to understand how faith and reason can be reconciled. End of introduction. Suggested reading. For beginning readers, you can enter Narnia through one of two portals: the wardrobe door that Lucy found in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, which introduces these stories in the order in which they were written, or in The Magician's Nephew, where you can watch the world being made in Narnia's own time. But before turning to the next page, please read The Silver Chair. There you will meet a seminal figure in the history of philosophy who also cooks a mean eel soup. Advanced readers. Many have rightly criticized Anne Wilson's biography of C.S. Lewis for its inaccuracies. But Wilson is a wonderful writer, and his version of the Lewis story is worth reading. The best account of Lewis's life, though, is by his good friend George Sayer. Graduate level. Walter Hooper did C.S. Lewis fans a wonderful service by carefully editing and annotating Lewis's letters in 3 volumes that total some 3,400 pages. While Lewis hated writing letters, especially to the strangers who often pestered him, he saw it as his duty to help those who sought him out, even financially. He also carried on lively correspondence with dozens of remarkable thinkers, some of whom will be mentioned later. While a few of Lewis's surviving letters are repetitious, many are brilliantly entertaining and insightful. They also provide a kind of bibliographical soundtrack to Lewis's life, and an excellent cheat sheet for young people looking for books to furnish the living rooms of their minds. Also mentioned in the introduction, Feng Yulan's short Introduction to Chinese Philosophy. On Richard Dawkins, see his The God Delusion, or my response to that, The Truth Behind the New Atheism.